The next thing we are going to see is IRAC norms. Income recognition and asset classification norms we are going to see for different types of accounts, whether you have to book the income or not. That and all we will see in detail. Now we are going to see income recognition and asset classification norms. So here there are two elements. First thing is income recognition, second one is asset classification. For income recognition, what the question is whether the interest income can be booked on accrual basis. Now one thing we need to understand is banks are either they can be banking companies. Banking companies, they act as per the Companies Act and also the Banking Regulation Act. So under Companies Act and Banking Regulation Act, both you have to book income based on accrual basis. And if you have a separate act also, like State Bank of India, it has a separate act. Like that, if you have that type of banking company, they also should book income based on accrual basis. Now what is the income? The main income for bank is, as you guess, it is the interest on advances. Whatever the loan they give to customers, they will charge interest. That is the main income for the banks. Whether that income they have to book on accrual basis, is it correct? In what cases they should book on accrual basis and in what cases they should not book on accrual basis. That we are seeing in this thing for income recognition norms. And then asset classification. There are different types of classification for banking assets. Like advances, they will be classifying it into NPA, substandard, doubtful asset, loss asset. That we will be seeing in detail. First thing is income recognition, whether interest income can be booked on accrual basis. For that we need to see the classification of the asset. For NPAs, we need not book on the accrual basis. We should book only on cash basis. So we should know first what is a NPA. What is a NPA, and for that we have to see the asset classification norms. First we have to see whether we have to book the interest income. For that we are going to asset classification. Now broadly there are four types of asset. Four types of the main asset is advances. As we already saw, the main asset is advances. The loans which is given by the bank to the customers. That is the main asset. There are four types of asset in that. Standard asset, substandard, doubtful and loss asset. How they are separating this, that we are going to see in detail. First thing we need to see is, in assets, loans and advances, there are primarily two types. First thing is performing assets, second one is non-performing assets. What is a performing assets? In performing assets, the repayment of interest and principal is proper. That is, there is an income generation. Income generation is proper in that type of account. The income is properly generating, there is no problem. Every time based on the due date, correctly the income is coming and we are getting the income properly. There is no problem. Income generation is proper. This is a performing asset. If there is a problem in the income generation, we have doubts regarding the recoverability, whether we will be able to recover the amount or not, we have some doubt, or there is some uncertainty, we have delay in repayment. In that cases, we can classify it as non-performing asset. Repayment is not properly done. We already saw that there are four types of assets: standard, substandard, doubtful and loss. The standard asset is A1. It is denoted by the initial A1. And this A1 is a performing asset. It will come under the performing asset category. Income generation is proper. Repayment is properly done. And for non-performing assets, these are all the non-performing assets. The repayment is not properly done. A2, A3 and A4. These three come under the non-performing assets category. Now you might have understand what is performing and non-performing. Under this we have to go in detail what are substandard, what is doubtful and what is loss asset. For that we can see an example. For example, you are getting a housing loan. For that you are having an EMI. Monthly you have to pay 10,000. This is the monthly payment, how much you have to pay. You have to pay it on the first day of the month. January 1, February 1, March 1, like that you have to pay. This is the due date for repayment. Now if you do not pay that amount, what will happen in the bank's account? Bank's book. Bank will maintain books of accounts. No. In that, what will happen to your loan account? You have bought loan from the bank. There will be your account in the bank. What will the bank do in the books of account? Because you are not paying the amount. That we will be seeing here. Here the due date for repayment, you did not pay. Here 30 days have passed. You are not paying continuously for 30 days. Not a problem, it will still be a standard asset. And then till 60 days from the due date, you are not paying. no problem, it will be a standard asset. Up to 90 days you are not paying, there will be no problem, still it will be a standard asset. These are all performing assets. There will be no classification as NPA. And from the 91st day, it will be classified as a non-performing asset. So here what you can understand is you have time up to 90 days. From the due date for repayment, you have time till 90 days. If you pay within 90 days, no problem. If you do not pay within 90 days, from the 91st day, it will become a non-performing asset. Straight away, it will not become a loss asset or doubtful asset. First thing, it will be classified as substandard asset. From 91st day to up to 12 months of non-payment, it will be classified as a substandard asset. From the due date, 90 days, 12 months. 91st day to 12 months. This period, it will be called as substandard asset. After 12 months also you are not paying, then it will be called as a doubtful asset. From 12th month end to up till when you are paying, maximum how much time you are paying, till that date it will be called as a doubtful asset. Till 90 days you have time, it will be called a standard asset. From 91st day to 12 months, it will be called a substandard asset. From 12 months to when you are repaying that date, it will be called as a doubtful asset. This is the basic classification. And then in the standard asset also, we have three categories. We saw 90 days, right, the due date. The 90 days time for classification of NPA. In that also they are dividing. First 30 days, it will be SMA 0. Next 30 days, up till 30 plus 30, we have 60 days. Up till 60 days, it will be SMA 1. And again 30, first 30, second 30, and then third 30. Total 90 days, it will be SMA 2. Now what is this SMA? It is a special mention account. If you do not pay till 90 days, from the 91st day, it will become NPA. Now, this is a special mention account. It is not a NPA, but there is a delay in the repayment. That is what they are saying. When you do not repay itself, there is a difference between you and the other account. Other accounts are properly repaying. You are not repaying. For differentiating your account, they are classifying it as SMA 0. You are not paying from the due date up to 30 days. They will be keeping it in the SMA 0. What is SMA 0? There is a delay in the repayment. That is called as stress in the bank terminology. You have some kind of stress. You do not have the money, you do not have proper turnover, or the salary is not credited. Like that, some kind of problem you have. So that there is a chance whether you may default on the loan. You cannot repay the loan, or you will not be able to repay the loan. There is some probability for that. That is called as stress in the bank terminology. Up till 30 days, if you do not pay, it will be SMA 0 account. And then after 30 days, 31 to 60 days, if you do not pay in this period also, it will be called as SMA 1 account. Why this SMA 1? In SMA 0, it is a smaller level. If it is a SMA 1, there is more stress. SMA 0 is slight stress. Now in SMA 1, it is a more stress. There is more probability of you defaulting the loan. And then 61 to 90 days. In this period also you do not pay. There is more and more stress in this account. This is the differentiation category. How much there is a probability for you defaulting. Like that, for that assessment, they are making this classification. And after 90 days, if you do not repay, it will be called as non-performing asset. The income generation is impaired. There will be no amount coming from you. Only if you repay it, there will be the amount. For NPA, it is a serious problem. You are not paying for 90 days. 90 days is a very big time limit. 3 months they are giving. Before that you are not paying. So what they are doing is, they are stopping the income recognition. From the 91st day, whatever the income which is accruing, interest which is accruing, they will not debit it to your account. And any other interest also, which is earlier debited to your account but not paid. It is debited to your account but you have not paid the amount. That also they will reverse. So the income they will not recognize on accrual basis. They will recognize only on cash basis. Only when you make the payment, they will enter it in the books of accounts. Earlier what they will do, when the payment is due, they will recognize the income. But if it is a NPA, there is a little problem in the chances of recovery. So now you should not record the income. Now what you have to do is that record only when the repayment is received in cash or in bank account. In some way or the other, the amount has to come to the bank. Only then they will record the income. Whether interest or principal repayment, whatever, they will record only they receive it. It will not be recorded on accrual basis. This is the importance of NPA classification. Here we have seen the NPA classification. Here you can ask that in SMA 0, 1, 2, during this times the interest will be booked or not. That you might have a question. Only on becoming NPA, there will be a stopping for income recognition. When it is a standard asset, the income will be recognized properly. There will be no problem even if you do not repay. As long as the asset is a standard asset, they can record the income. In NPA classification, we saw that if the amount is not paid up to 90 days from the due date for repayment, then that that loan should be classified as an NPA. It will be a substandard asset, and then it will be classified as doubtful, then it will be classified as loss asset. That and all is after. First thing is, if the amount is not paid for 90 days, then it will become an NPA. This is for normal loan accounts. But there is a special rule for cash credit and overdraft facility. I will explain it very simply. First thing is, you should have two amounts. The first amount is a sanctioned limit or drawing power, whichever is less. This is the limit amount. For example, if your sanctioned limit is 1 lakh rupees, but the drawing power is only 50,000 rupees. Here, whichever is lower you have to take. Here, the first limit is 50,000 rupees. So, the limit is 50,000 rupees. And then you have to take the amount outstanding in that loan account. How much amount the borrower is liable to pay, that you have to see. For example, if it is 75,000, we can take it. The limit amount is 50,000 and the amount outstanding is 75,000. Here, for classification of NPA, what you have to see is that if the outstanding amount 75,000 is more than the limit 50,000, that you have to see. The amount should be more than limit for 90 days continuously. If it is continuously for 90 days, the outstanding amount is more than the limit, then it is a NPA. Or the outstanding amount is less only, in that there is no problem. The next checking what you have to do is that you have to check if there is any credit in the loan account for 90 days, previous 90 days. If there are no credit in the account, only amount is debited, amount is spent, but no amount is deposited, no amount is paid for repaying the loan, then in that case, you should classify it as an NPA. First condition, when the outstanding amount more than limit for 90 days continuously. Second one, no credits for continuously 90 days, then also NPA. And then third thing is, there is credit, but it is not sufficient to cover the interest itself. You are checking for a 90-day period. In the previous 90 days, you have certain credit. For example, you can take there is 10,000 rupees credit in the loan account. But the total interest debited during the 90 days period is 50,000. If the 50,000 is interest debited, but only 10,000 is credited, then also you can classify it as an NPA. First thing is outstanding amount more than limit for 90 days. Second thing is no credit for 90 days. Then also you can classify it as NPA. Third thing is there is credit, but it is not sufficient to cover the interest debited. There are credit, but the amount of credit is less than the total interest debited in the previous 90-day period. The credit also you should see for 90-day period. The interest debited, that also you should see for the 90-day period. If that condition is fulfilled, then also you can classify it as a NPA. This is the NPA classification norms for cash credit or overdraft. In the normal other loan account, you can see the 90 days repayment. If the amount is not repaid for 90 days from the due date, then you can classify it as an NPA. That status is called as overdue in the bank terminology. The amount is not paid for 90 days from the due date. It is called as overdue status. The amount is overdue for 90 days. Like that they will say. And in this, if any one of these conditions are satisfied, the account will be called as out of order. It will be said that the account is in out of order status. In that case also, you can classify it as NPA. If the amount is not paid, it is called overdue. If any condition is satisfied for cash credit or overdraft, it will be called as out of order. Here in the guidance note, they have given the definition for substandard assets, doubtful assets, everything. A substandard asset would be one which has remained NPA for a period less than or equal to 12 months. The account has been an NPA for up to 12 months. When it will become NPA? Up till 90 days you are not repaying, then it will become a NPA. Then for that NPA, it is remaining as an NPA for up till 12 months. Then it will be a substandard asset. For more than 12 months, if it is NPA, then it will be called as a doubtful asset. Now another classification we saw is that A4, loss assets. When it will be called as a loss asset? By making any inspection by bank, auditor or by RBI inspection, they are finding that there is low chance for recoverability. Low chance to recover the amount. The borrower cannot repay. He is in a serious loss. He does not have money. You cannot recover any amount from him. Now it is a problem. You cannot recover, but you are showing it in the books as an asset. You are showing it as asset, advance. Now you have to write off that asset. Since you cannot recover the asset, you should write off it. You should debit it to P&L account. You should completely make it outside the books. So by making it outside the books, you are writing off the loss asset. Either you have to do this, or you have to make another alternative thing. You have to make a provision of 100%. You have the loss asset, you will still have it in the books, but you will have a 100% provision. Even if the borrower does not pay, you can take the amount from the provision and match it against the borrower account. You have to make a 100% provision. For loss assets, compulsorily 100% provision must be made. Now why we are doing the provision? When the borrower does not pay, you cannot even recover from the borrower. You can take the amount from the provision, you can adjust it against the borrower account. The loan will be satisfied by taking amount from the provision. This is the reason we are making the provision. Provision will be made by debiting to P&L. This is one point. How you will make a provision? The entry will be P&L account debit to provision. This will be the normal accounting entry for creating any provision. If for example there is a loss asset of 1 lakh rupees, you have to make a provision. The entry will be P&L account debit 1 lakh to provision 1 lakh. This will be the accounting entry. By creating this provision, you are making a, what we can say, a hedge against the loss. In future, even if you have the loss, you can recover it from the provision. This is the use of provision. The next thing we are going to see is that why we are creating this provision, why we are doing the asset classification. By asset classification, the only thing is differentiating. There is no other use for asset classification. Like that you can have a question. For that question only, there is provisioning norms. Why the provisioning norms is that in standard assets, there is a little risk. There is a little risk or no risk also we can say. Just some days the repayment is delayed, there is no risk. But in substandard asset, there is a little amount of risk. That is, risk is more than the standard asset. And for doubtful asset, there is even more risk. And in loss asset case, you cannot even recover the amount. Only then it can become a loss asset. The RBI inspection or auditors have identified that the borrower cannot repay the amount. You cannot recover even a single rupee from the borrower. In that case, it will become a loss asset. Based on the risk, what we have to do is, we have to make provision. If we have more risk, we have to make more provision. If we have less risk, we have to make less provision. This provision is for covering any future loss which may happen because of the non-repayment of the borrower. For that, we have provisioning norms which is given by RBI. For standard assets, the general provision is 0.25%. You have to make 0.25% provision for standard assets. Even if it is a commercial real estate, the provision will be 1%. If it is a commercial real estate, residential housing sector, you have to make 0.75% provision. These are all the purpose for which the loan is granted. Based on this, you have to make the provision. For all other advances, 0.40% provision you have to make. This is the standard provisioning norms provided by RBI. Now there is things for SMA account. SMA account is also standard asset. There is no special provisioning norms for SMA account. But for NPAs, there are different provisioning. In NPA only there are three types: substandard, doubtful and loss assets. For substandard assets, for secured portion, you have to make 15% provision. Secured portion means already we saw. For what amount of the loan, the value of security is there. That much is the secured portion. For that, you have to make 15% provision for substandard asset. For unsecured portion, if it is an infra project loan, you have to make 25% provision. If it is a non-infra project loan, then you have to make 20% provision. For doubtful asset, you have to make 100% provision for unsecured portion. Whenever you have to make a provision for unsecured part of the loan, unsecured part of loan, you have to make 100% provision. If the unsecured amount is 1 lakh, you have to make provision for entire 1 lakh. You cannot escape from it. So for unsecured, you have to make 100% provision. For secured portion, we have a table. If it is doubtful up to 1 year, it is called as D1. For that, you have to make 25%. For D2, 1 to 3 years, you have to make 40%. For more than 3 years, you have to make 100% provision. Doubtful, secured, but up to 1 year only it is doubtful. For the 25. 1 to 3 years, 40. More than 3 years, 100. This is the provisioning norms. And for loss assets, we already saw that it should be written off. And 100% provision should be made if it is not written off. Now this is the provisioning norms for loss asset. And then one more important point in asset classification is erosion in the value of security or fraud is committed by the borrower. In these two cases, how the asset classification should be there. If the erosion in the value of security is significant, for example, if there is an immovable property, it is given as security. At the initial valuation, first time, the value is 1 lakh, which is decided by the independent valuer for the immovable property. And when the second time you are making the valuation, it is coming as 40,000. 40,000 is coming as the value of immovable property. Now, the erosion in the value of security. The value of security has reduced by 60,000, it has been reduced. After the valuation, now what we are getting is the realizable value. The 40,000 is less than 50% of the original amount. Originally, we got 1 lakh. Now, we are getting only 40,000. 60% of the amount is eroded. The amount in the value of security got diminished due to market conditions or some other reasons. Now the value of security is reduced by 60%. Now what you should do is that even if it is a standard asset or something, you have to make it as a doubtful asset. Why we are making it as a doubtful asset? Because there is a significant reduction in the value of the security. Now we have no means for recovering the amount. If the borrower does not pay, there is no means for recovering the amount. Now the next thing is if the realizable value of the security becomes less than 10%. Originally first time valuation we got 1 lakh as value, but second time valuation we are getting only 8,000. So 92% got eroded. Only less than 10% is remaining. Now we should classify it as a loss asset. This is the classification for erosion in the value of security. Now, if there is a fraud committed by the borrower is receiving the money as a loan and doing any fraud. Now the bank detects the fraud. Bank is finding out the fraud. Now what the bank should do? First step is it should make provision for the full amount liable. What is the loss to the bank? They should make full provision. So they can serve themselves. They can protect themselves when they get any loss. So by this they can protect themselves from the loss. Then for making provision, if it is a very big amount, they cannot do it immediately because it will affect their financial statement. So they can do it immediately or over a period. They can do it in 3 quarters or 4 quarters. They can divide the amount and make provision. But the period should be not more than 4 quarters. By maximum 1 year, you should have made full provision for the loss amount. This is the case in case of fraud committed by borrower. At the year end, what you have to do is that amount of provision to be made in upcoming quarters, how much you have already recorded as provision, and then how much you are going to record upcoming, how much you are going to record in the future year. That also you should debit to other reserves. For example, if the total amount of loss is 1 lakh rupees, by 2 quarters, by the end of this year, you have recorded only 50,000 rupees. Now in the next year, upcoming 2 quarters, you are going to record 50,000 rupees. This amount you have to debit to other reserves by the end of this year itself. This is called as unamortized provision. Total 1 lakh provision you should do. 50,000 you completed. This 50,000 you are going to do in next 2 quarters. Before that, debit it to other reserves now itself. This is the regulation in case of fraud committed by borrowers. Now this is all about the income recognition and asset classification norms. The next thing is we are going to see about verification of advances. Advances, as we have saw, is very most important and it covers mainly most of the balance sheet items. Among all the balance sheet items, this is the important one. This is very important as NPA classification, provisioning, everything the bank may or may not do correctly. We only have to check that as statutory branch auditors.